Our expert panelists joining us today are Dr. Richard Palmquist, integrative veterinarian and owner of Centinela Animal Hospital. He's an author, lecturer, and teacher. Dr. Christina Chambreau, internationally known homeopathic veterinarian, lecturer, and teacher. Joan Ranquet, animal communicator, teacher, author, lecturer, and owner of Communication with All Life University. And Brendan Golia, professional pet trainer, behavior expert, and owner of OC Canine Coaching. Welcome to Smart Pet Talk. I'm your host, Anna DeVere. Welcome, Dr. Marc Bekoff, to the show. I am so excited to talk about your other latest book, The Emotional Lives of Animals. A leading scientist explores animal joy, sorrow, and empathy, and why they matter. Now, I understand you penned the first edition of The Emotional Lives of Animals in 2007. Is that true?
Yep. Finished it in 2006 and it came out in 2007. Yeah.
And at the time, you made a prediction that over time, our understanding of animal cognition and emotion would grow richer, more accurate, and possibly different. What have you learned since that time, and something that might surprise you about the emotional lives of animals?
Well, all of those predictions came true, and in some ways much more. After the book was published, I mean, people tell me, and I didn't think of it that way, it was really like a catalyst for a lot more research into animal emotions, animal feelings, animal sentience. Mm-hmm. But it was clear back then when I wrote it that there was so much that we knew that a lot of people didn't know, or didn't know we knew. Mm-hmm. And not a lot of it was being used on behalf of the animals. It was really frustrating. And so when my publisher, I know the first time my publisher asked me a few years ago whether I wanted to do a second edition, I flatly said no.
Okay.
I mean, for a number of reasons. Number one was because the database and the research and just articles and wildlife documentaries. I mean, if you're in touch with anything, they've just ballooned over time.
Yeah.
So I write for Psychology Today regularly, and there's never been a shortage of information. Mm-hmm. And so finally, it was about a year and a half ago, he said, I just published a book called Dogs Demystified, or was working on it. It wasn't out yet. And he said, well, I wanted to revisit something with you. And I sat, we were doing a Zoom, and I went, oh God, I hope it's not a second edition of The Emotional Lives of Animals.
Okay, I'll take your reluctance. I buy that.
And so, but then no, I really sat down and I said, yeah, let's do it. And so, although I had a lot at my hands that I had already done, it was really a lot of work. Organize, decide what's in the second edition, what we could leave out, and putting it together, because I learned at the time that the requirements from the National Library of Congress, or I think that's what it's called, is that a second edition has to be 20% different from the first.
Oh, wow. And no pressure.
None. No, there actually wasn't, because I had so much material, so I sat down to work on it, and, it would have been probably a year and a half ago. And I thought, I'm going to knock this puppy off in a couple of months. No, although I had a lot of information, and I kept a really good, both a book library and, just records on email and wherever else on my floor and stick them. It really took a lot of time. But what it did for me, and I really mean it, was it made me revisit just a lot of empirical research, a lot of stories I had. And I think that in the end, I had added something like 300 new references.
Wow.
Notes. Yeah. And that did not, at all use up all the information I had. So what it did for me, and I'm thankful, I'm glad I did it. I love the new edition. But what it did for me was it drove home the point that I made in the first edition, which was finished, something like 18 years ago, was that we know enough now, meaning back then, treat animals better. Now, I mean, if anybody doubted it back then, there's no doubt now. So the book, I mean, it's, it's got a really very firm agenda, and that is we need to use what we know on behalf of animal well-being, non-human animal well-being. And it followed really nicely because I've written a bunch of books with a woman named Jessica Pierce, and Dr. Pierce is a bioethicist, and we work really well together. And in a book we wrote called The Animal's Agenda, we developed this idea called the knowledge translation gap. And what it boils down to is that there's a gap. We don't use what we know. And this book, the first book was personal, but this book is perhaps a bit more. So there's an afterword in the book. It was part of the last chapter, and my copy editor, who I've worked with for the same amount of time, said, "Oh, I don't know if this fits," and you're getting cranky because I had a line in there, and so I said, "No, I'm not getting rid of that section." And then when I was rereading part of the early proofs, really, I said, let's make this the afterword. So in the afterword, I lay it out. I mean, it's nothing new to people who know what I write, but I do get cranky. And the reason I get cranky is because there's a lot of the same old. So a lot of people don't know that in the United States Federal Animal Welfare Act, the word animal was redefined to exclude laboratory rats and mice and birds and fishes, reptiles, invertebrates. Seriously. And so when people say, "Oh, you're just lying about that," no, you can go on the web and see a statement that says we have redefined the word animal to exclude these animals, and they're the most used in research.
Flower essences, Mother Nature's gift, a natural solution to everyday problems. Blackwing Farms knows their flowers for pets and people.
Blackwing Farms is aromatherapy for animals. Basic understanding of aromatherapy is that the scents kind of have a calming, peaceful effect. Then, animals have a greater sense of smell than we do. Over the time that we've been using them, it's become so evident how powerful and how effective they are.
It does make a difference. The balms and the sprays make a difference. I've seen it happen.
Contact Blackwing Farms to find your flower. Oh, it breaks my heart. I'm a desert tortoise owner. And that one gets my heart every time he wakes up in this grand, like he's still alive. He's 40 years old. So,
oh my, that's incredible. Wow.
Yeah. And, and that's the thing. And this was an animal that was raised since a hatchling. My aunt had him when he was the size of a quarter. Wow. And she passed away. And I know the timbre of my voice reminds that animal, Ronnie is his name. And there's so much about him that's gregarious, right? In tortoise speak.
Oh, so sure.
Here's what I really, really appreciate about you, Dr. Bekoff, is that I believe that our pets, our companions, are our entry point, as compassionate beings into having appreciation for the animal world. But I'll give you a quick story. My brother was invited to a hog greasing contest where you try to catch a pig that's got a greased, exterior. And the animal reminded him so much of his corgi that he just stopped. He broke down into tears and he said, "I don't want to do this." Wow. He reminds me of Max, and I am never going to eat bacon again.
I love it.
But that is where we need to get to so that we don't define lab rats and lab, animals as as not part of that caring, compassionate world. So what you do is very important, making that connection as human beings to our animal kingdom. So be as personal as you want, be as cranky as you want. I appreciate everything about your research and your willingness to do a second edition, beyond your wishes or at your protestation.
Your story is great because I've always argued that we can use, and I don't mean use in a bad way, of course, but use our companion animals as a gateway species to the world of other animals. So some of my lines is when people, say, well, it's okay to do this to a wolf or a coyote or a wild animal. And I say, well, would you do it to your dog? And it's either a conversation stopper because they say no, or it's a conversation stopper because they have no idea why I'm asking it. And I'm a pretty nice guy. I mean, I don't get in people's faces at all. And when they say, well, I love animals and that's why I hunt them, I always say, I'm glad you don't love me.
You're the most quoted. I've gone on to find quotes and your name comes up time and again. And that's wonderful that you say these things.
But I mean, really, the word's getting out there and things have changed. They're changing far too slowly for me, but they've changed. And once again, I do a lot of work with kids and, Jane Goodall's Roots and Shoots group, and we talk about these things. And what astounds me is that when I do these classroom discussions, presentations with first, second, third graders, how they can always ask me a question about which I know nothing. And I'll say, well, how did you know about that particular, one was a South American rodent. And the little girl said, oh, I saw it on the web. So I said, okay, for next week, would you please prepare a 5-minute presentation on that animal? And she said, well, you know everything about it. And I said, I've never heard of that animal. I mean, seriously, I had never heard of this small little rodent. So it empowered her. And she gave a wonderful presentation that probably rivaled some of my colleagues.
Right.
She was like 6 or 7 years old. But what I hope this book really does, and the word was used in a discussion, and I think it may be in one of the endorsements, as a breakthrough, saying, okay, we've heard it enough times. We need to do better. I've heard it enough times. We need to use what we know about other animals to protect them and to enhance their well-being. I think the message is getting out there more clearly, and I think people are much more open to the fact that I'm a researcher, I'm a scientist making these claims. They'll say, oh, you're just, a guy in the street and you're touchy-feely and all that. And I'll go, well, I may be, but I'm also a scientist and I've spent countless hours watching non-human animals. So I'm hoping that this could be a breakthrough simply because we have to do it. I know people will say we don't have to do anything but breathe and pay taxes and die, I suppose. But no, seriously. And I've had some nice emails and discussions with people who agree now much more than they did back then. It wasn't just storytelling back then. There was a lot of research, but I think because of popular documentaries, popular articles in newspapers and magazines. You talk to people who live with dogs, cats, lizards, snakes, hamsters. They will tell you that sometimes they'll say to me, huh? I mean, do your colleagues really believe this? And sometimes I just say, sadly, they do, but times are changing.
Well, this book is important. I know that your lifetime has, influenced a lot of people. And I appreciate that you put these things together and you do the homework and you do put it in a book form, because anybody can appreciate that's a very important topic. How do we find this book and where do we go to get it?
Well, once again, I'd say, all the major book dealers have it, Amazon. For some reason, it's not there now. Maybe it doesn't matter for this interview, but New World Library, they're my publishers.
Okay.
And so, yeah, all the major booksellers have it. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate the time and certainly giving us a window from, the perspective of demystifying animal behavior, why it matters. And we will definitely add this to our announcement when we put the episode out, all of the ways to get in touch with you and your fine work. But thank you again for sitting down and chatting with me.
My pleasure. I could talk about animals all day.
I could listen all day, and we will see you. And Scotch, bring it. I'm going to be there. Medical information obtained from our website or the live show is not intended to be a substitute for professional care. If your pet has or you suspect they might have an illness or other medical condition, you should consult a healthcare provider. The opinions expressed on this TV program are not necessarily those of Smart Pet Talk, this TV show, or their sponsors. For all questions or info on sponsorship, email us at info@smartpettalk.com or visit our website at smartpettalk.com.